across the country, palliative care for babies has come into being. And then another name for palliative care is comfort care. And that basically means that if you have a baby who has very complex problems that is likely not going to survive, we can offer you the option of intensive care, do everything even if we're not sure where that's going to go or where we think it's not going to be helpful, or provide comfort care so that your time with your baby is quality time. And so this is a story about a baby who has anencephaly, which is a fatal birth defect. I think this represents really about one of the most important things that we do in the NICU, which is accompany our patients and their families on their journeys wherever it takes us. So the mother's name is Joanna. One evening I was called to talk with Joanna, who was admitted to the hospital on referral from her doctor, who practiced in a town more than an hour away. She was 37 weeks pregnant with an anencephalic fetus and was in very early labor. Anencephaly basically is a birth defect where the skull does not close, it does not form, and so the brain is actually visible with no covering except a little membrane. I went to see her with Abigail, my charge nurse in the NICU, that night, hoping to determine how she wanted to manage the delivery of her baby, and more importantly, what she wanted her experience with this baby to be like after its birth. Abigail and I entered Joanna's room to find a woman reclining about halfway back in the single large hospital bed, propped up with pillows. Her wavy brown hair fell down and touched the shoulders of her hospital-issue gown, which was white with a nondescript tiny blue check pattern. The small gold cross she wore just brushed the upper border of her gown. Her husband, Dave, was dressed in a Rolling Stones t-shirt and skinny black jeans. He sat quietly hunched forward in a chair beside her bed. "I'm Dr. Hall," I said upon meeting the two of them, "and this is Abigail. We're here to talk about your baby's birth. What do you know about anencephaly?" "My doctor told me not to look up anything about the baby on the internet," Joanna answered. "And he told me that if I delivered in the hospital in our small town, they would take the baby away from me after birth and I wouldn't be able to see it. That's why I wanted to come here." "So, did you look it up?" I asked. "No," she said, "but my brother is an EMT and he sees all kinds of stuff. He did research on anencephaly and he said the pictures were so awful he couldn't even look at it." She grimaced. "It seems so unfair," she continued. "I've always taken my one-a-day vitamins even before I became pregnant." Joanna was referring to the important role folic acid plays in preventing anencephaly and related defects. The March of Dimes began promoting awareness of the significance of getting adequate folic acid during pregnancy in 1998 with the goal of reducing the incidence of this defect. Folic acid can definitely minimize your risk, but it can't completely eliminate the possibility of having a baby with this problem, I explained. Joanna's belly bumped up from beneath the sheets of her bed, and her fingers periodically went to a spot on her abdomen as she cringed with pain. Her husband didn't appear to be alert or engaged with our discussion, yet I had the distinct feeling he was listening. He tapped his foot while he stared at the floor. Anencephaly occurs at about 26 to 28 days of gestation, I began, before you probably even knew you were pregnant. It's a failure of the neural tube to close. I pulled apart my hands to draw a neural tube, one of the earliest fetal structures, in the air. If the neural tube doesn't close at the bottom, that's spina bifida. If it doesn't close at the top, that's anencephaly. In anencephaly, the brain doesn't form normally, and in fact, the skull doesn't form around the brain. Unfortunately, there's really nothing we can do about anencephaly. There's no way to fix it. The babies live for a short time only. Joanna sighed as though she had heard this part before, the part about not being able to fix it. "So what we usually do," I continued, "is try to figure out how to make your time with this baby quality time." Joanna's drawn face made her underlying sadness appear more pronounced, and she looked older than her 32 years. She nodded as I spoke. It's already so hard to say goodbye to this baby, and it's just going to get harder, she said. We'll help with that, I reassured her. I know you had a previous pregnancy loss at 28 weeks, I continued. What was that experience like for you? Joanna began her story. My pregnancy was going along just fine. I felt great. I loved being pregnant. Then one day it occurred to me I hadn't felt the baby move for a while. He had always kicked and turned, and then he seemed to stop, but I wasn't really sure. I called my doctor and went right in, and when he did the ultrasound, he couldn't see the baby's heart beating. The baby was already gone. A few tears began to leak from the corners of Joanna's eyes, barely visible under the heavy rim of her glasses. Her husband still tapped his foot on the floor steadily, without a break. I had to go through labor and deliver him normally, but when he was born, I cried so hard my OB just took him away. He said I'd already been through enough. I shouldn't have to see him. He gave me a sedative to knock me out, so I never did get to see the baby. I think that's why I've had trouble getting over it. Oh dear, I sighed, caressing Joanna's arm. You probably thought that you had your one bad thing happen to you. Your turn was over and nothing like that should ever happen to you again. Her head bobbed up and down in a nod. And now, here you are again. We can make this experience so much better for you, I promised. We have a palliative care program for babies with birth defects who aren't expected to survive long after birth. We also call it a comfort care program, I explained. Instead of providing intensive care for your baby, our goal with comfort care is simply to make the baby and you as comfortable as possible. We want to help you decide how you want things to go. And that's kind of the depressing part of that story, but it's really, I think, a happy story because the delivery and the time that the family had with their baby was really wonderful. We let them bring all their family members in and visit and hold the baby, and they gave the baby a bath and dressed the baby in a pretty gown. They had photographs taken by a wonderful organization called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep that is volunteer photographers all across the country that take pictures for families whose babies are going to pass. And so they kind of designed how they wanted the situation to go, and nobody was afraid to talk to them about what was going on, and it was a very moving experience to be a part of.